In the heart of America's history stands a man whose name is synonymous with freedom and unity, yet whose origins were rooted in the deepest poverty. Born in a single-room log cabin, largely self-educated, he became a master of law, a political giant, and the very architect of the modern American state. As the nation teetered on the brink of dissolution, how did this rugged son of the frontier find the strength, the moral clarity, and the courage to hold the Union together and redefine the meaning of democracy? The year is 1809. The place is Sinking Spring Farm, Kentucky. Abraham Lincoln's beginning was not one of privilege, but of stark, unyielding necessity. His father, Thomas Lincoln, was a carpenter and farmer, perpetually struggling against poverty and the constant need to move in search of better land titles. His mother, Nancy Hanks Lincoln, was a quiet, devout woman who, despite her own illiteracy, possessed a sharp mind and a strong moral compass rooted in the Baptist faith. Life was a relentless cycle of hard labor. Abraham's earliest memories were of clearing brush, splitting rails, and working the unforgiving frontier soil. Formal schooling was a luxury he rarely afforded. In total, he received less than 12 months of cumulative classroom instruction. Yet the wilderness itself became his university. He was naturally inquisitive, a trait his father found impractical and often punished. The first profound tragedy struck in 1818, after the family had relocated to Indiana. The devastating milk sickness caused by drinking contaminated milk swept through their small community. Nancy Hanks Lincoln died, leaving 9-year-old Abraham heartbroken and adrift. Her passing left a void that would shape his empathy, but also contributed to the melancholic spells that plagued him throughout his life. A year later, Thomas married Sarah Bush Johnston, a widow with 3 children of her own. Sarah was a loving, intelligent woman who instantly recognized the brilliance latent in her stepson. Crucially, she defended his passion for reading against his father's disdain. She understood that Abraham's true calling lay not in the dirt, but in the realm of ideas. Under Sarah's encouragement, Abraham devoured every book he could borrow: Parson Weems' biography of George Washington, the King James Bible, Aesop's Fables, and the Revised Statutes of Indiana. He would read by firelight, calculating sums on a wooden shovel with charcoal, and practice his fledgling writing skills on scraps of paper. His mastery of plain, powerful English, the hallmark of his later speeches, was forged in this solitary, self-directed study of fundamental texts. This rigorous self-education gave him a unique perspective, a common man's understanding applied to uncommon ideas. At 22, Lincoln finally made the decisive break from his father, seeking his fortune independently in New Salem, Illinois. New Salem was a crucible for the young Lincoln. He worked a series of jobs that kept him close to the common folk: postmaster, store clerk, flatboat man, and eventually deputy surveyor. His legendary honesty, which earned him the moniker Honest Abe, stemmed from simple incidents like walking miles to return a few cents mistakenly overcharged to a customer. It was here that Lincoln's gift for oratory and storytelling first found an audience. He could captivate a crowd with a humorous anecdote, often weaving moral lessons into his tales. He also possessed a powerful physique, famously winning a wrestling match against the local gang leader Jack Armstrong, an event that secured his respect and friendship within the rough-and-tumble community. His true intellectual growth, however, lay in his relentless pursuit of law. While postmaster, he found a copy of Blackstone's Commentaries on the Laws of England. This dense legal text became his master key to professional life. He studied it voraciously, often sprawled out on a blanket beneath a tree. His political ambitions were soon ignited. In 1832, he made his first run for the Illinois General Assembly. He failed, but his defeat only fueled his resolve. In his campaign circular, he demonstrated his trademark common-sense approach. "I presume you all know who I am. I am humble Abraham Lincoln." Tragedy and romance intertwined in this period. The death of Anne Rutledge, a woman he deeply loved, plunged him into a period of profound depression. This deep capacity for sorrow became a defining characteristic, connecting him emotionally to the sufferings of others. By 1834, he was elected to the state legislature, moving from New Salem to the state capital, Springfield. This move marked the end of his frontier life and the beginning of his ascent into the world of professional politics and law. Springfield became Lincoln's home base, but his practice as a lawyer required him to travel extensively across the 8th Judicial Circuit, a vast territory covering dozens of counties. For months at a time, he would ride the circuit, often sleeping in cramped inns, sharing beds with judges and fellow lawyers. This circuit life was Lincoln's finishing school. He honed his legal mind on complex cases, from land disputes and small debts to murder trials. His methods were unique. He avoided bombast, relying instead on crystal-clear logic and an ability to distill complex issues into simple, moral terms that a jury, often comprised of farmers, could understand. His reputation for fairness and ethical practice solidified the Honest Abe legend within the legal community. He once famously advised, "Discourage litigation. Persuade your neighbors to compromise whenever you can." In 1842, Lincoln married Mary Todd, a well-educated, high-spirited woman from a prominent Kentucky slave-holding family. Their marriage was passionate, tumultuous, and deeply challenging. Mary was fiercely ambitious for her husband, but her volatile temper and later mental health struggles tested him constantly. They had 4 sons: Robert, Edward, Willie, and Thomas, or Tad. The loss of 3 of their children in childhood, Eddie in 1850 and Willie in 1862, inflicted unimaginable grief on the couple, forging a bond of shared sorrow that ran beneath their many conflicts. The death of Willie in particular, during the darkest days of the Civil War, nearly broke both of them. Politically, Lincoln served a single term in the U.S. House of Representatives from 1847 to 1849. He became a strong critic of the Mexican-American War, challenging President Polk's claim that the war was begun by Mexican aggression. His stance was unpopular and cost him political support back home. Disheartened, he returned to his lucrative law practice, believing his political career was likely over. The quiet, reflective years of the early 1850s saw Lincoln prosper financially and intellectually, but the storm clouds of a national crisis were gathering, destined to pull him back onto the national stage.
The catalyst that tore Lincoln from the contentment of his law practice was the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, championed by his rival, Illinois Senator Stephen A. Douglas. This act repealed the Missouri Compromise of 1820, allowing territories to decide the issue of slavery through popular sovereignty. For Lincoln, this was not just politics, it was a profound moral violation, the potential spread of a great moral evil. Lincoln's outrage was immediate and powerful. He believed the founding principles summarized in the Declaration of Independence assertion that all men are created equal were being destroyed. His return to politics was driven by this moral conviction. He articulated his views in his famous Peoria speech of 1854, denouncing slavery's extension as a betrayal of American values. "If the Negro is a man, why then my ancient faith teaches me that all men are created equal, and that there can be no moral right in connection with one man's making a slave of another." He joined the newly formed Republican Party, which was founded on the principle of halting the expansion of slavery. In 1858, he challenged Stephen Douglas for the Senate seat. Though he lost the election, the Lincoln-Douglas debates launched him into the national consciousness. In 7 fiery debates across Illinois, Lincoln methodically dismantled Douglas's arguments for popular sovereignty. He forced Douglas to make his controversial Freeport Doctrine, which stated that territories could effectively bar slavery despite the Supreme Court's Dred Scott decision. While politically damaging to Douglas nationally, the debates gave Lincoln the platform to articulate the moral core of the Republican position. His House Divided speech, given at the start of the campaign, remains one of his most powerful warnings. A house divided against itself cannot stand. I believe this government cannot endure permanently half slave and half free. I do not expect the Union to be dissolved. I do not expect the House to fall, but I do expect it will cease to be divided. By 1860, his reputation as a clear-thinking, morally grounded politician had spread far beyond Illinois. His decisive speech at the Cooper Union in New York City in February 1860, where he historically and legally traced the founders' intent to oppose slavery's expansion, cemented his status as a frontrunner for the Republican presidential nomination. The 1860 election was a political earthquake. The Democratic Party split into northern and southern factions, effectively guaranteeing a Republican victory. Lincoln won the presidency with only 39.8% of the popular vote, but a clear majority in the Electoral College. The South, seeing his victory as a direct threat to their entire economic and social structure, immediately began to act. Lincoln's victory was the signal. Within weeks, South Carolina seceded from the Union, followed by 6 other Deep South states. Before Lincoln even set foot in Washington, D.C., the Confederate States of America was formed, claiming sovereignty over Fort Sumter and other federal properties. President James Buchanan, Lincoln's predecessor, was paralyzed by indecision. The winter of 1860 to 1861 was dominated by fear and anxiety. Lincoln maintained a public silence, carefully navigating the crisis without a formal office. His inaugural journey from Springfield to Washington was cloaked in secrecy due to credible assassination threats, forcing him to slip into the Capitol under the cover of darkness. On March 4, 1861, standing before a nation actively dissolving, Lincoln delivered his first inaugural address. His tone was firm but conciliatory. He made it clear he had no intention of interfering with slavery where it already existed, but he forcefully asserted the legal and moral perpetuity of the Union. I hold that in contemplation of universal law and of the Constitution, the union of these states is perpetual. No state upon its own mere motion can lawfully get out of the Union. He ended with a powerful emotional appeal for peace. We are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection. The mystic cords of memory, stretching from every battlefield and patriot grave to every living heart and hearthstone all over this broad land, will yet swell the chorus of the Union, when again touched, as surely they will be, by the better angels of our nature. But the better angels were silenced by the sound of cannons. 6 weeks later, on April 12th, the Confederate bombardment of Fort Sumter began. The war was officially started. The Civil War was a baptism by fire for Lincoln. He had no military training beyond brief service in the Black Hawk War decades earlier. Overnight, he became the commander-in-chief of a massive, unprepared military. The early years of the war were a disaster for the Union. The First Battle of Bull Run was a humiliating rout. Lincoln's generals, men like George McClellan, proved to be slow, indecisive, and frequently insubordinate. McClellan, in particular, suffered from a debilitating case of the slows, continually overestimating the enemy and refusing to engage. Lincoln's frustration was palpable. He famously quipped that asking McClellan to advance was like pegging down a flea. Lincoln had to learn military strategy on the job, studying texts on warfare, constantly reviewing dispatches, and visiting the troops. He became the de facto strategist for the Union, frequently bypassing his generals to issue direct orders. Politically, he faced challenges from all sides: radical Republicans who wanted immediate abolition, Copperhead Democrats who favored peace and compromise with the South, and his own cabinet, many of whom initially viewed him as a clumsy, inexperienced backwoods lawyer. Lincoln managed his team of rivals, including Secretary of State Willard Seward and Secretary of Treasury Salmon Chase, with remarkable patience and political skill, often letting them vent before quietly imposing his own will. Amidst the constant pressure of war, personal tragedy struck again. In February 1862, his beloved son Willie died of typhoid fever in the White House. The loss devastated both Lincoln and Mary. Lincoln, always prone to melancholy, carried this grief from the start. Lincoln insisted the war was solely about preserving the Union. But as the death toll mounted, he realized the war needed a higher moral purpose to sustain the North's will and to cripple the South's greatest asset, its slave labor force. By mid-1862, Lincoln decided the moment for emancipation had arrived. It was a calculated, brilliant move that served both military and moral ends. He consulted his cabinet, but kept the final decision his own. Secretary of State Seward wisely advised him to wait for a Union military victory, lest the proclamation appear to be a desperate act. The Union's narrow victory at the Battle of Antietam in September 1862 provided the necessary momentum. 5 days later, Lincoln issued the preliminary proclamation. On January 1, 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation was formally issued. It declared that all persons held as slaves in states or parts of states then in rebellion were then, thenceforward, and forever free. Crucially, it was an executive order issued under his war powers. It did not immediately free slaves in the border states loyal to the Union, but it transformed the entire nature of the conflict. The war was now definitively a fight for human freedom. The proclamation ensured that European powers, particularly Great Britain and France, who had themselves outlawed slavery, could not politically justify intervention on the side of the Confederacy. It also authorized the recruitment of African American soldiers into the Union Army, with nearly 200,000 joining the fight for their own freedom. Despite the moral boost of emancipation, 1863 began with massive challenges. Confederate forces scored victories, and anti-war sentiment grew in the North, culminating in the violent New York City draft riots in July. Yet that same month saw the two most critical victories of the war. In the West, General Grant finally captured Vicksburg, securing Union control of the entire Mississippi River and effectively splitting the Confederacy in two. Simultaneously, in the East, General Robert E. Lee gambled on a massive invasion of the North, leading to the brutal three-day Battle of Gettysburg. Union forces under General George Meade finally achieved a decisive victory, halting the Confederate advance. 4 months later, on November 19, 1863, Lincoln traveled to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, to dedicate the cemetery for the fallen. The main speaker, Edward Everett, delivered a long 2-hour oration. When it was Lincoln's turn, he spoke for only 2 minutes. His Gettysburg Address transcended the occasion, becoming perhaps the most famous speech in American history. He refocused the audience not on the living, but on the principles for which the soldiers died. He redefined the American experiment, stating that the nation was conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. His closing words immortalized the democratic ideal, that we here highly resolved that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. The Gettysburg Address was a powerful intellectual justification for the war, ensuring that the immense sacrifice had a meaning far beyond mere political union. By 1864, Lincoln had finally found the general he needed, Ulysses S. Grant. Grant was an aggressive, relentless commander who understood that victory meant destroying the enemy's ability to fight. Lincoln promoted him to general-in-chief. The war became a brutal, grinding campaign of attrition. Grant engaged Lee in a series of bloody battles, the Wilderness, Spotsylvania, Cold Harbor, driving toward the Confederate capital of Richmond. Meanwhile, General William T. Sherman led his forces through Georgia in the devastating March to the Sea, shattering the South's infrastructure and morale. Despite the military successes, 1864 was an election year, and Lincoln's chances looked bleak. The immense casualties, the length of the war, and the influence of the Copperheads led to many, including Lincoln himself, to believe he would lose to the Democratic candidate, his former general, George M. McClellan. But in September, Sherman delivered a psychological knockout blow with the capture of Atlanta. This major victory galvanized Northern support. Lincoln won the election decisively, securing a mandate to prosecute the war to its end and secure permanent abolition. In March 1865, with victory imminent, Lincoln delivered his second inaugural address. This speech was not a triumphant boast, but a theological rumination on war, sin, and divine will. He spoke of the shared moral responsibility of both North and South for the sin of slavery. Fondly do we hope, fervently do we pray, that this mighty scourge of war may speedily pass away. Yet, if God wills that it continue, until all the wealth piled by the bondman's 250 years of unrequited toil shall be sunk, and until every drop of blood drawn with the lash shall be paid by another drawn with the sword, as was said 3,000 years ago, so still it must be said, the judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. He closed with the guiding principle for the nation's future, with malice to none, with charity for all. On April 9, 1865, Robert E. Lee surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse. The Civil War, the nation's agonizing trial, was over. Lincoln's vision for Reconstruction was one of swift, generous reconciliation, a policy that prioritized peace and healing over punishment. He advocated for the immediate passage of the 13th Amendment, which would permanently abolish slavery throughout the United States. Just 4 days after Appomattox, on the evening of April 14, 1865, Lincoln sought a moment of relaxation with his wife, Mary. They attended a performance of Our American Cousin at Ford's Theater. The president was in good spirits, reflecting on the nation's newfound peace. At 10:15 p.m., the quiet was shattered. A Confederate fanatic and renowned actor, John Wilkes Booth, slipped into the president's box and fired a single shot into the back of Lincoln's head. The next morning, at 7:22 a.m., Abraham Lincoln was pronounced dead. The entire nation, both North and South, was plunged into an unprecedented wave of grief. The long funeral procession, traveling by train from Washington, D.C. to his final resting place in Springfield, Illinois, became a national ritual of mourning watched by millions. The man who had entered the presidency as a divisive figure left it as a martyred symbol of unity, freedom, and human dignity. Abraham Lincoln's life began in obscurity, forged in the crucible of poverty and self-determination. He became the leader who, against impossible odds, redefined the soul of America. He left behind a legacy of integrity, empathy, and moral courage, ensuring that the principle that all men are created equal would not perish from the earth, but would become the ultimate aspiration of a truly united nation.